foods should you avoid if you have PCOS? Click like right now if you've ever watched a YouTube, checked out an Instagram, or read an article that tried to answer the question, what foods should you avoid when you have PCOS? And by the time you finished it, were you super depressed? Me too. I think this is a totally unhelpful question to try to answer. And my number one reason for that is because largely what foods you should avoid and what foods other people should avoid really depends more on the individual than on PCOS itself, because PCOS expresses itself so differently and people have different trigger foods, right? So I'm going to give you some tips on how to figure out what foods you should avoid that will help you personalize an answer to that question. So number one is if you eat something and afterwards you feel gas or bloating, you get a headache, you get cranky, you get hyper, you feel weird, you don't feel like yourself, you need to stop eating that food, or at least limit it, right? Like there are just some things that make you feel awful and you shouldn't eat them, and you don't even need to know the scientific reason why. The result is already there. That food's not working for you. Okay, number two, don't eat anything you can't stop eating. Come on, be honest with yourself. You already know exactly what foods those are for you. For me, it's these chocolate covered almonds with sea salt on them from Trader Joe's. Can't buy them, can't eat them, because I can't eat one. I can't eat a serving. I gotta eat all of it. So if a food has that kind of control over you, it probably doesn't belong in your house. It probably doesn't belong anywhere in your diet almost ever at all. If you're going to eat it occasionally, maybe eat it in a controlled environment. For example, if your trigger food were pizza, maybe you only eat pizza when you're sitting down out at a restaurant, so at least you don't eat the whole pizza. I feel like most of the time when you're eating in public, it kind of like limits how much you're going to eat. Like you don't like just like sit there and you keep eating pizza while people are talking and trying to leave the table and pay the bill. So number two, avoid the foods that trigger binges, and that's just a normal human thing. Everybody's got these trigger foods. Number three is just be mindful of how much added sugar you're eating. This isn't like any sort of mind-blowing advice, right? You've known since you were a little kid, your mom told you this, like eating tons of sugar is bad for all humans, and it's particularly bad for PCOS. So that doesn't mean that you can never have any food with added sugar. It just means you need to be really conscientious of how often that is entering your diet. So let's just be clear on what I'm talking about when I say added sugar. The sugar in fruit, the sugar in a potato, the sugar in anything that grows up off of the ground is naturally occurring sugar. And I'm telling you right now, it's probably not something worth you worrying about, because people just don't tend to binge eat or overeat on these types of foods. What I'm talking about is things that the white sugar, so literally the sugar, the food, being added into a recipe. So that's your baked goods, that's your chocolates, your candies. It's also in sneaky things like condiments, alcohol, and other beverages, sweet tea if you're Southern, y'all. So that is something you want to be conscientious of. And what I have found is that just reducing the amount of added sugars that come into your diet is sufficient for managing PCOS. You don't have to be like, I found out I have PCOS, I cannot have a birthday cake this year. It's probably not the case, unless you're allergic to something in birthday cake. I don't know. But I hope that these three concepts, so basically things that make you have weird symptoms, things that you can't stop eating and trigger binges, and added sugar. Those are just my really simple guidelines for foods that you should avoid. And I hope that helps you personalize your foods to avoid list versus going out on the internet and getting some advice that may or may not be accurate. To tell you the truth, there's a lot of people out there listing off foods that you should avoid, and they don't have the research to back it up. And when that is the case, you need to do your own research on yourself and really evaluate how certain things feel to you. I hope that is helpful, and I hope that maybe this keeps you from clicking on that kind of a blog post and getting depressed the next time you read it, because you should love your food, love your life. It shouldn't be just because you have PCOS, your life is a big list of don'ts. I don't think that's necessary.